Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Qdabra Software Weekly Webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started here. My name is Hillary Stupa, and I'm a developer with Qdabra Software. I'm going to apologize in advance. I know I sound a little rough. I came down with a really bad cold last week, so this week I feel great, but I still sound like someone you're probably really happy you aren't meeting in person right now, because I can assure you, you do not want to catch this cold. It's been a nasty one. Before we get started talking about qRules 7.1 and the new send email command, we have a new team member here at Qdabra that I'd like to take a second to introduce you to. Her name is Delene Sellers. She is a senior project manager here at Qdabra Software, and I've just been absolutely thrilled to have the opportunity to work with her. She is everything a developer could hope for in a project manager. I mean, efficient, on top of the game, always can tell me which direction I need to go. So she's been a real boon to me, and I think a real boon to our clients and our projects. Delene, do you want to say hello and say a few words?
Sure. Thank you, Hillary. That's so nice. Hi, everybody. I'm just really thrilled to be here and learning a lot about Qdabra and InfoPath. And I just want to let you know we're getting our projects lined up here for the next quarter or two. And so if you have any needs or any support or project needs, just reach out, let us know. We'll be happy to start working with you. So thanks very much, Hillary, and I'm looking forward to the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Delene. And so everybody knows, you know, our email addresses. It's firstname.lastname@qdabra.com. I think sales@qdabra.com is an email address you can use if you're interested in getting a project started. And most of you are probably familiar with support@qdabra.com, which is our support email alias. So lots of ways to get a hold of us. Also the contact us form on our website. So again, lots of ways to find us. We're here if you need us. So with no further ado, let's talk about this new qRules command called send email. You know, we often want to send email from a form, right? That's a pretty basic kind of capability. Most of us communicate via email anymore. Well, actually, most of us communicate via text, but not in a business setting. So most of us want to send business-related emails, and InfoPath has some basic capabilities for this. You guys have all probably created a basic email submit data connection. But there's some real common pain points in the email process from InfoPath. For example, you have an option when you set up your data connection to either email the actual form or to include the current view of the form instead. If you email the actual form, your recipient has to have InfoPath and access to the template and access to the things the template is using in order to be able to successfully open that form. So if you, for example, have a form where people are attaching a bunch of files, and when you send an email, you would like that email recipient to get those files, the only option you have right now is to send the form and hope they've got InfoPath and template access, because otherwise you can't get those attachments to them. Fortunately, with qRules, we've got our new send email command, and this can solve attachment issues along with a few other form email related pain points. So email plus attachments plus qRules equals a great big shiny red heart. You know, we've always kind of, with qRules, tried to cover these places in InfoPath where we've seen gaps. So email pain points, and now these are mine. I think probably some of these are going to be universal. You may have some that are different, but these are the big ones I've seen and that we see people asking about. One is that you can't include attachments when you're sending the current view of the form. The second one, this is a filler bug. You can't switch views then send. If you switch views and then send, I've got a sample email I'll show you, but I think some of you have already seen this. You can't email multiple views, so if you've got information in multiple views you want to send and you don't want to include the form with your email, you're stuck. If you're using your traditional email data connection, I don't know, maybe this doesn't drive anybody else crazy, but you know when you go set up that email data connection and there's a little FX box by every single field, to CC, BCC, subject, so you could enter a formula or select a form field or a form logic field for every single one of those except the intro. For some reason they make us hard code the intro. What were they, somebody somewhere was like, oh, nobody's ever going to want that to be dynamic. I mean, so many problems could be solved just by being able to include some form data in that intro. But, you know, I'll stop complaining about that. And of course, in the filler, when you send the email, that send email dialog pops up. The user can cancel it, and then what's the user experience? They get that some rules cannot be run dialog box, which we are all familiar with and we all love so very much. I'm going to go ahead and just pop up some of my email here real quick that I sent to myself, some samples that I sent to myself. And we'll take a look at the outcome of some of these here. I may have a few little challenges with screen sharing just because it's been a bit since I've done it. You guys, you know what? I never started sharing my screen. I knew I was going to do something wrong here, and now I can see what it was. We're going to boom, 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 go back through these slides real quick so you can see all these great slides I created for you. So this was the first one about, you know, how we don't know what we can get with email without qRules. Here's with qRules, and here's the big shiny red heart. You guys must have thought I was just crazy listening to me talk without seeing the slides. And here's the slide with the email pain points. Fortunately, the other ones were pretty much context-free. So now I've got some slides going, and I apologize for that. I knew I was going to forget something along here, and it was screen sharing. At any rate, fortunately, it was before I showed you anything too interesting. It was just some goofy slides. Here is some email that I sent myself when I was doing prep for this. Now I'm watching the audience view to make sure you guys are seeing this. So I sent myself an email from a filler form and included attachments, okay? And this is what my attachments look like, right? So you can see that obviously this is not clickable. Now it's nice, I get a little information, I can see what it was, I can see what type of attachment it was, and I can see what size it was. You know, if I included in this email maybe a link to the form, if the end recipient was interested and had access, they could click the link and they could go open up that form and see the attachment. So that would probably be an okay workaround. If I switch views and send here in filler, this is what I get, right? And you can trust me on this. My view was not blank. So I switched views, I hit send, and I get a nice blank email. What happens in the filler is the view doesn't get rendered before the email submit connection fires, and that's why you get a blank view if you try to view switch before you email. And if you, in the filler, try to view switch, send email, and switch back to your previous view, you will get nothing but errors. And here is a switch view and submit from the browser. And in this one, you'll just have to trust me that this is all the same form. It did switch views and submit. And I want to show you in the browser, let me drag over an Internet Explorer window. In the browser, this is the same form, and this is just using built-in stuff. And you guys have heard me, I'm sure, kind of get a little snarky about browser forms in the past, just because we find there's a lot of really special bugs and careful handling required sometimes in the browser. This is one thing that they got really right in the browser, is the email experience. Because if I'm just going to type in some info here. If I hit switch views and submit, this button is set to switch views to view 2, send an email, and switch views back to view 1. The user experience, well, I got a flash this time. Sometimes I've just seen the little sending data, but you can see the second view was never actually displayed to me. And in my inbox here, I just got a nice email. And you can see it switched over. Here's the time, right, 8:14. It just switched over to that second view and sent it to me. So the user experience there is actually better than in filler. So just kind of something for you to keep in mind if you are using email submit connections in a browser form. Some of it is a little bit of a better experience. Okay, so moving on, now that I am successfully sharing my slides, the send email command, I just want to talk about some of the basics in the command. Like all qRules commands, we have a number of parameters that you can set. Like all qRules commands, there's probably a little tiny bit of a learning curve getting used to the new ones. There's two basic options, and we will, after I walk through this, we'll look at some of my commands, and we'll look at some actual qRules commands for this, so don't feel like you have to absorb all this right now. There's two basic options for the method parameter in the send email command. The first one is Outlook. Now, to use the Outlook option for the method parameter, your form has got to be full trust and it's got to be a filler form. And that's because we are actually behind the scenes leveraging Outlook to send the email. So it's not going to work on the server, and InfoPath's object model is not going to let us go sending email programmatically without your form being full trust. To top it all off, we're giving you this option of attaching your attaching your form attachments to your email. And so once again, the InfoPath object model, programmatically what we're doing is we're writing those attachments from your form off to a temporary location so that we can then attach the file to the email message. And InfoPath isn't going to let us talk to your file system without your form being full trust. Okay? So in filler, it needs to be a full trust form. If it's going to use the connection option for the method parameter, your form does not have to be full trust, and it can be a browser form, but keep in mind that SharePoint Sandbox limitations require that forms with code, like qRules, do not have email submit connections. I've got a screenshot here of the design checker error you get. You can't submit through email in a sandbox solution. So if your form has code or your form has qRules, it has to be admin deployed if you're going to email submit in your browser form. Just something to keep in mind. Practically, what does this mean? It means you would not be able to use the send email command in a Office 365 browser form, because in Office 365 SharePoint Online we cannot admin approve a template, so any template with qRules or code has to go into the sandbox. Okay, so that's just a little something for you to keep in mind when you're designing. I do see we've got a question about having a dynamic mail subject. Actually, InfoPath does allow this with the built-in data connection. You do get to set the subject via a formula or selecting a field. And so you can use the little FX box. We'll take a look at that. We'll walk through a data connection. So for either option, whether you're using method of connection or of Outlook, you can set to CC, BCC, and subject, just like an out-of-the-box email data connection. If you are using method equals connection, you have the option of setting these, because the qRules code will use the defaults you set up when you initially set up your data connection if you don't include these parameters. If you are using method equals Outlook, you have to give us at least a to address, because in this case we don't have a data connection to go leverage defaults on, and we are just going to have to rely on you to provide us with that information. As with all qRules commands, these formulas can be created via a concat statement or other formulaic functions and logic, so you can get pretty creative when you set up your command. If method is equal to connection, you can also set the intro field. Now that is the one that I kept whining about earlier, and that's the intro in the data connection that InfoPath developers who created the product for us felt we probably would never want to set via formula, and we always do. And you have to set the submit parameter, because we're leveraging your submit data connection to send the email. Therefore, you have to tell us what the submit data connection is. Okay, so those are the requirements for method equals connection. For method equals Outlook, you have the option to set a parameter called body. Now, this is going to be kind of similar to intro in the method equals connection option. And this is just some text that you want to have in the body of the email. So let's say, for example, that you don't wish to send any views of this form. You want to send an email. You're going to use the Outlook method because you want to include the attachments. And let's just say you want to set the body text. And it could say something like, please see the attached documents in regards to purchase order 12345, right? And purchase order, the number 12345 maybe comes from a form field because you know what your purchase order number is there. And the attachments on the email come from attachment fields. Your users have attached a few files too in a repeating attachment field. And then the email goes off to your purchase order department, and it has a number about it has the purchase order number so they can look it up. It has the documents so they can file them. You can use body or you can use views. If you include views, we ignore body even if you include it. And that's the name of one or more views separated by an and symbol. So you can send multiple views. And finally, the piece that really was the reason this command got created to start with is the attachments parameter. And that's the XPath to the base 64 attachments that you wish to add to the email. So that's sort of the high level. These are the command parameters. Here's a little bit of an overview as to what they are. Again, as with all commands, you're going to find this in the command overview that installs with your qRules trial or with your full qRules version. I encourage you to leverage the command overview as much as possible. I do understand it's a huge document, but that's because qRules, it's like Lego, you know, you can just build whatever you want with it. So we've got a ton of features in there for you. But, you know, you can just do Control F and go look for send email and just focus on the command you're working on. Although, you know, I know I'm a big fangirl, but you may want to just leaf through that overview at some point to kind of see what all is there, because there's a lot of information. So we're going to take a look at a couple samples now. First, I just want to look at a plain old email form, and this guy just has a regular data connection. We have no qRules, and we're just going to look at a couple pain points here. I need to resize this just a little bit. I changed the resolution in my monitor, hoping that it wouldn't be overwhelming for anybody's screen. So this is a regular old form. Let's take a look at our data connection. This form has no qRules in it. We'll modify our email submit connection. And as you can see, right, here's the FX button for subject for the one questioner that was asking about that. So you can see right here I've selected the subject field. I mean, if I wanted to, I could do a concat, and I could concat subject plus the text I'm going to type into another field, or I could use well, anything that's available to me here in this formula editor window. But the introduction field, we don't have that option. There's my intro. And so here we've got the options of, you know, how we're going to send the form. I've got this one set right now to send the active view, and you can also just send it as an attachment. But again, we've already seen an email where you could see how those files come through. They don't, you know, if you've got attachment files. So I'll go ahead and finish this out. I just want to show you two of the real pain points that I see with using a built-in data connection. Yeah, you're right, Michelle. It is. It's the intro. You're unhappy about the same thing I am, and this is something that send email can address for you. But let's look at a couple of the pain points here with just regular rules. This first button simply has a rule to submit. The second button has a few other rules on it. Now, if you've seen some of our forms that we've designed, or maybe seen some stuff in the forum, one thing we've suggested as a workaround to the issue with filler forms sending a blank view on a view switch is that you use two sections, right? And you hide one and show one. So I want to talk about a potential issue that we have with that, again, using just a built-in data connection. And this is sort of why I feel like send email is useful even if you are using a data connection and not using the Outlook option. You know, even if you're not using a full trust form with the Outlook option, it can be useful because it can prevent some problems. So here we're going to hit submit. Show details. Oh, this was my fault. This was my bad. Let me type in a value here so it knows who to send it to. Okay, so now we hit submit. So let's just say your user looks at this and they say, darn it, I didn't finish filling out my form. I'm going to cancel. Right? So here we get the some rules were not applied because the action was canceled. No harm, no foul here because you've got the submit button. It's just sending via a submit connection. But what about in this case? We hit submit with more rules. Now you can see behind this box that I changed this. I had a helper field. I set it to true so it hides the main body of the form and displays just the piece I want to email, because this is a scenario where I just want to send a little bit of information. I don't want to send the full view. I'm trying to work around this view bug where I would be sending a blank email if I switch to views, and now my user hits cancel because they've got some more stuff they want to fill out. We already know what this says, but we hit show details because we're neurotic, and we say okay. And so now you and I, we know what to do next, right? Control Z. But your user may not know what to do next, and they just get stuck. And so that is one of the problems we see in the filler with a regular email data submit connection. And here's, you can see I'm just setting a helper field, clearing a helper field, and my user, I've got users who will get stuck. You probably do too, because we don't always think of using Control Z to get us unstuck in a scenario like that. So let's move on and let's take a look at an email form with qRules. So here's the form that I've got qRules injected into. Now in this one, I no longer have a special little section. I'm not going to need it anymore because I've got the option of submitting using Outlook, and we're going to look at that. The first rule I want to look at, though, is the one here. In this case, I'm submitting using a data connection and qRules, and you can see I've got a few rules here because I want to handle for an error. You can use a similar technique here to handle for errors in any forms with qRules. We recommend it. We do this a lot. In a lot of cases, we execute a command, and then the next thing we do is we check that Qdabra rules success node, right? So we go and we check, is success equal to true? If success is not equal to true, we're going to show the user a dialog box message, or in the browser, we might populate an expression box and show them that. In this case, what I've done is I've gone ahead and said, look, don't run any more rules if success is not equal to true, so I don't have to have a condition on this one, and it's going to show a message if the user does have success. And I want to drag, if you're not using execution history to keep track of what commands you've run and what the results have been, I greatly encourage you to take a look at that. That's reasonably new. I can't remember what version we added in, and I think we added it in 5.2, and in 5.2 we weren't showing the full command that you ran, but at this point we are showing the full command. I'm just going to modify the formatting here so it's a little more readable, so that you can, in any form session, kind of look back and see what happened in your form. Put it in a debug view or something like that that you have access to, so that if your users have trouble, you can go see what commands were running and what the problems were. So let's take a look at this guy. I forgot to show you the text I'm actually using here. Let's take a look at it. So here I'm using the connection method. I'm not setting CC or BCC. If I had set those in my email connection, this would use the defaults there. I could override those here if I wanted to. I could override the subject. In my email connection, I've set it to use this subject field for the subject. I could override that here and say I want to use a different field for it. I am using the intro here, and I've hard-coded the email address because I'm lazy. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say OK, and we'll preview this. Now we saw in that earlier form when I previewed and I forgot to fill out my send to, we saw that I had an error. So I'm going to fill out a test intro here. I'm not going to fill out a subject, so it should use my default. No, I will fill out a subject because my default was using this field. Sorry. My subject. Send to. I won't fill out that. And so I'm going to submit using a connection in qRules, and I have a mistake. That's okay. Submit parameter is required when using the connection method. And see, this is good. You guys can see where I messed up. I didn't include my submit parameter. Let's go add that. Honestly, I did this earlier today and I messed up and I thought that I had included this, but you know, we're live. What can I say? Submit equals email, and we're going to spell it right and everything. Submit. There we go. Now it'll use my email submit connection. We'll hit preview again. So one thing I just showed you there was that my error handling wasn't very good because I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel here. Okay, this time I didn't fill in an intro. I'm going to hit cancel, and it says, okay, you've canceled the email. I can handle rejection. And that's because I just checked success. I didn't check the error message. So you could, in your error handling for this, you could go ahead and directly check for this text. The form was not submitted because the action was canceled. You could just check for canceled. Is that spelled wrong? It could be spelled wrong. I think it's spelled wrong. I think I have to file a bug on myself for spelling. But yeah, so you could check for this text, and then you would be able to handle first the error if the user canceled it, and then second an error if it failed for any other reason. Since I didn't enter any text here for the intro, it used my hard-coded intro. So this is my new intro. And now you can understand why canceled is maybe misspelled. And here's my subject. And we'll go ahead and submit using a connection in qRules. And this time you can see I've got my dynamic intro set. Here's my new intro. Even though I don't have a 2 filled in, it's using the 2 from my formula here instead. And I'll hit send. Right? Hooray! I sent an email. We're all done here. Right? And if we scroll down, we can see this time we've got success and that my success message was displayed. And my inbox is, you know, rapidly filling up. But here's my latest email, right? And again, you can see my blank file attachment there. So let's take a look at my final rule set, which is on my submit using Outlook. This one I didn't add any error handling to. And it's just going to use the Outlook method. So you can see my method is using Outlook. I do have to use a 2 here. I will have to fill out the send to form. If I want a subject, I do have to use that. And I'm going to send view to, and this is the XPath to my file attachments. Okay, so this is the piece I'm really most excited about this command for, is for including file attachments. And we're going to go ahead and preview here. And I guess we don't have intro in the Outlook method, so I won't bother. You can see I'm really creative here with my subjects, and I'll email it to myself. Now I'm going to insert a couple of attachments. I encourage you, anytime you're working with anything that's repeating, that when you test, you also test with repeating. It's pretty easy when you're in the habit of testing, you know, your form, you're used to it, you're not the end user. It's pretty easy to just get in the habit of only entering one repeating item, but I really would encourage you to be a little neurotic when you're testing and make sure you always make your repeating data repeat, because sometimes that's where you find the interesting issues, right? So here's my submit using Outlook. Now this rule, we're going to look at it one more time because I skated over a little something, and that was this views parameter. So I am sending view 2 instead of view 1. So my end email should have view 2 and my files. So I'm just going to cancel again because InfoPath won't let me do anything with a dialog up. And I'm going to hit submit using Outlook, view 2 and attachments. So you saw that was fast, that was quiet, right? We didn't have a dialog pop up letting us know that an email was being sent. In fact, you would need to give your user some feedback of success in this case or failure, because otherwise you just can't, I mean, you can't tell anything's happening in the form. We can see the command we ran here in the execution history. We can see the success. And here is my email. And you can see it sent view 2. And here's my files. You can see this is a very important document. And here's my Word version, which is also extremely important. And again, the high level of creativity you are used to seeing from me in my demos, right? Where everything is test and nothing is more than 3 lines. But, you know, we have limited time here. So at any rate, I'm going to pop back into PowerPoint here. That was my demo. That's the generals about this command. I encourage you to get creative with it. try it out. The qRules trial is already injected in these sample forms that you can get. So, the takeaway here is that obviously email is useful. We're still using it in all these business scenarios. It's more useful if you can do what you want with it instead of being constrained by the limits of InfoPath. And so you can send just what you need to, the way you want to, using the send email command. And you can also handle for some of these InfoPath pain points. I really encourage you to try it out if you're having any InfoPath email related quandaries. I checked our website for upcoming webinars. I do think we're having one on the 2nd and the 9th. I just don't see information about them up there yet. You guys who are here, a lot of the names are familiar, so I'm guessing a lot of you are regular attendees. I encourage you to check the website, watch for email for upcoming webinars and webinar relationships, registrations. So do fill out the webinar survey, and we will send you these sample forms that already have qRules send email injected. A lot of them also have my email address. So as you're testing, I would encourage you to update or change that. But if you spam me, I don't mind. It's my fault for sending this stuff out. And maybe I'll get my email address out of there before maybe I'll take my email address out of that command before I send you these samples. Just in case. I don't want my inbox to blow up. At any rate, I really encourage you to check out qRules 7.1. Give this a try. Does anybody have any questions right now about this new command or qRules 7.1 or qRules in general? If you've got some pressing qRules question you'd be interested in an answer to, do feel free to get it typed into the questions window. So you're probably already familiar with the InfoPath dev site. We keep a close eye on there, especially in the software section and the Qdabra rules section. I keep a close eye on the qRules questions. I try to get back to most of them. If you ever post a question on the forum about qRules and you don't see us get back to you, feel free to hit support@qdabra.com and point us to it. Feel free to email me personally and point me to your question, because we really try to be responsive to those qRules questions. I'm not seeing any questions pop up, so hopefully this will have covered the basics and get you guys started. Check us out on qdabra.com, InfoPath Dev, and we also have a site up called FormsQuo, where we're talking a lot about, what's coming after InfoPath when we reach a point where Microsoft finally really does give up on InfoPath, which, as we all know, has been sort of extended again. So anyway, the saga continues, right? So it was great seeing so many familiar names, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thanks so much for attending. Fill out the survey. Let us know if you have any additional questions, and have a wonderful rest of the week. Talk to you guys soon. Thanks.